Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to talk about a topic that was inspired from a simple conversation that I had with a potential client. It's on transferable skills. How do you transfer skills from conventional assets or conventional reservoir engineering to unconventional reservoir engineering? Before we get to the content, please be sure to like this video, subscribe so you can get more content in oil and gas and professional development topics, and please be sure to comment on the video below so I can incorporate your feedback into future videos. Please be sure to hit that notification bell when you do subscribe, because I upload whenever I want. Well, let's get to the content. This video is another stream of consciousness in the sense that whatever comes to my mind, or however I learned the unconventional reservoir engineering skill sets, I'm going to talk about the transferable skills that I used from conventional reservoir engineering. As a background, and I'm sure a lot of you who are listening in have this background as well. In school, all the concepts that we learn primarily have been in conventional reservoir engineering assets. We were prepared to become petroleum engineers for the world. And that is somebody that I'd like to quote from a previous mentor of mine. But yes, we were preparing to be petroleum engineers, jack of all trades petroleum engineers, not particularly part of the shale revolution, being that shaleennial. I like to call myself a shaleennial. Now, one concept that I would like to keep in mind is that all these thoughts are my own and not based on any of the associations that I'm with. So just because I think there is a particular transferable skill that is prevalent in unconventional reservoir engineering, that is primarily my opinion of 10 years of observation and 10 years being in the game of oil and gas, particularly in the Permian, particularly in unconventional reservoir engineering. The first skill that I like to keep in mind is the decline curve analysis. And it sounds very straightforward for those of you that are really technical or in the space of reservoir engineering. But let's face it, conventional reservoir engineering and unconventional reservoir engineering doesn't have that many differences in skill sets when it comes to decline curve analysis. Yes, in conventional reservoir engineering, you typically use either an exponential, harmonic, hyperbolic decline for a particular well. But in some conventional reservoir engineering assets, you also use the modified hyperbolic decline, where there's a certain period of hyperbolic, and then at a point you reach a terminal decline that is exponential. If you are not familiar with the gobbledygook that I'm talking about right now in terms of reservoir engineering, I strongly suggest you take one of my short courses in decline curve analysis or unconventional reservoir engineering for those of you who are not familiar with it. I have one that's coming up online, virtual, in September. And then I have another short course that's coming up in the Image Conference in late August. So stay tuned on those opportunities, and I'll put that in the description box below. Now, conventional reservoir engineering decline curve analysis has a lot of similarities to what is expected of you in unconventional reservoir engineering. Now, there's a lot of flaws when it comes to decline curve analysis in general. It's that assumption of constant flowing bottom hole pressure or a very short time frame of transient flow in conventional reservoirs. Whereas in unconventional reservoirs, there's a longer period of transient flow. Therefore, the factors that you use to fit your curve in unconventional reservoirs are going to be a little bit different compared to conventional reservoirs. Now, when you're met with people saying that you need unconventional reservoir engineering experience, what they're really trying to say is on day one, there needs to be an expectation of knowing of the assumptions of unconventional reservoirs compared to conventional reservoirs. If you know the differences between conventional and unconventional reservoirs, then that's going to set you up for sure. But if you don't have those skill sets or the practical application of unconventional reservoirs, just know that from a decline curve analysis standpoint, you're going to have a longer period of transient flow. Therefore, the hyperbolic B factor that you're going to have to be using is going to be a little bit higher than what's typically used in a B factor in the conventional reservoir space. So that is a hack that I'd like to share with you between conventional and unconventional reservoirs. Knowing that you're going to have to use modified hyperbolic in your unconventional reservoirs and knowing that the B factor is going to be a little bit different at the very beginning between a conventional and an unconventional reservoir, and then setting the expectation that there's a longer period of transient flow between in the unconventional reservoir compared to a conventional reservoir. Okay. Now, the next skill that's transferable is well logging. Now you might be wondering, like, how in the world you talking about well logging? Like, aren't you a reservoir engineer? Like, why are you talking about well logging? Well, the reason why I mentioned well logging is the indication of shale or source rock in reservoirs for conventionals, and then knowing that you can actually produce from those formations using unconventional reservoir engineering theory. What did I just say? What I mean is, in conventional reservoir engineering assets, when you identify a shale zone, that is usually a zone that is not supposed to be a zone that can produce hydrocarbons using conventional means, such as not using hydraulic fracturing, like using gravel pack or other sorts of conventional completion techniques. Now, in unconventional reservoirs where you are using hydraulic fracturing to stimulate wells, you can still identify shale zones, and instead those are the reservoirs that you're identifying. You're using the source rock as the zone to frack that particular interval, as opposed to an interval that you need to avoid whenever you're stimulating a well. And on top of that, in conventional reservoirs, the geometry or the geometry is just different. Usually when I think of conventional reservoirs, and I typically think about it to the extreme of conventional reservoirs, is that you're looking at vertical wells, and you're looking at radial flow. Whereas in unconventional reservoirs, you're picturing a box in unconventional reservoirs, and you're identifying a shaly zone as a zone of interest, and that is your particular reservoir, as opposed to the zone that you need to avoid. So using well logging, but changing the context at what is a frackable zone or what is actually your reservoir, is the transferable skill between conventional and unconventional reservoirs. That's a long way of me for saying that. Now, the next skill that I'd like to talk about between conventional reservoir engineering and unconventional reservoir engineering, the transferable skills, is the data analytics and the data science. Now, what I mean by that is by analyzing, and this is going to be the most general term, by analyzing large data sets, you can still use regression analysis, you can still use statistics, you can still use a lot of the correlations between production metrics and how much you stimulate in a well for conventional reservoirs. The only difference between conventional and unconventional reservoirs is the magnitude at how much proppant and how much fluid that you're actually pumping. So that is a transferable skill I think is possible between conventional and unconventional reservoir engineering. Now let me see. And another transferable skill I'd like to say between conventional and unconventional reservoirs are the flow regimes when it comes to production engineering. Now, when I say flow regimes, I'm not talking about bilinear, linear, radial, boundary dominated. I'm not talking about that type of flow. I'm actually talking about like annular, bubble, churn, flow, like the type of multi-phase flow regime that you actually get in an unconventional reservoir. Now, in conventional reservoir terms, there are certain velocities that you have to take into account, which causes some of those flow regimes. Whereas in unconventional reservoirs, you just narrow down to a couple velocities, because in transient flow they typically are pretty high in velocities, and you have a larger flow regime, a lot more unstable flow regimes. So you're going to have a more dominant flow regime in unconventional reservoirs compared to conventional reservoirs. So in conventional reservoirs, there's a diverse kind of reservoir rock that you're looking into, whereas in unconventional reservoirs, you're looking at shalier rock, or you're looking at a shale zone, and you're also looking at higher gas velocities or higher fluid velocities, and you'd find one or two flow regimes that are a little bit more dominant. So if you're more well versed in those types of flow regimes in the unconventional reservoir engineering space, then you're golden. mean, it could be annular, it could be bubble, it could be churn, but it really just depends on your reservoir and what formation we're talking about here, as well as the gas to liquid ratios that your well is initially producing from. I think those are, it's not an exhaustive list, but I think those are all the transferable skills that I could think of in terms of conventional to unconventional reservoirs. At least those are the things that I started out with in my career, especially the reservoir engineering portion of it, where what the expectation is for an unconventional reservoir is a little bit different compared to a conventional reservoir, but you still have to use the fundamentals of petroleum engineering to master what you are seeing in unconventional reservoirs. It doesn't take a completely new type of engineering. Yes, it takes a different mindset, it takes a different geometry, but the physics is still there, guys. The physics is still there. It's just the orientation is a little bit different. Well, folks, if you're wondering about unconventional drilling, unconventional completion, I implicitly say some of those things, but I can definitely put it in the description box below. But I believe the most divergent drilling techniques is going to be, or the most divergent differences between conventional unconventional reservoirs is going to be the unconventional drilling, just because of the orientation at which you're drilling. I mean, yes, there's a vertical portion of it, and yes, drilling technologies have definitely changed throughout the years, especially what we learned in our drilling classes versus what we're experiencing right now. But then drilling through the lateral portion of it, the speeding time, the time at which you drill that well is going to be a little bit different compared to the time it takes to drill and complete a well in conventional reservoir engineering space. It's the geometry that's different. That's it. So I don't mean to oversimplify conventional versus unconventional reservoir engineering, and I'm not trying to downplay people saying that you need to have unconventional reservoir engineering experience. I'm trying to develop a hack in terms of, if you have conventional reservoir engineering knowledge, how you can apply that conventional reservoir engineering knowledge to unconventionals. Well, folks, that's everything that I wanted to mention in my stream of consciousness between conventionals and unconventional reservoirs. As usual, please be sure to like this video, subscribe so you can get more content in oil and gas and professional development topics, and please be sure to comment on the video below so I can incorporate your feedback into future videos. This is Yoga Pradhan. If you can't pronounce it, I go by Yoshi Pradhan, and I'm signing off.